Good evening, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would talk about this little video and this little topic that I did find very particularly interesting. And this is going to be a video that I'm going to review from the boxing channel known as Dante's Boxing Nation. And Dante's Boxing Nation put out a video where overall it was about Devin the Dream Haney and his potential fights overall, at least a little bit later on, with two of the most talented fighters, not only within the 135-pound division, but within the whole sport of boxing, Mr. Vasyl Lomachenko, and also that of Gervonta Tank Davis. And in this video, this was somewhat of a response to what Timothy Bradley had to say. And Timothy Bradley apparently recently in an interview, he stated that he believes that no one at 135, at least at the current moment in time, is going to beat that of Devin the Dream Haney, which I thought was a very interesting thing to say. And what I will say is this: Timothy Bradley is certainly entitled to his opinion, and do I believe that that is a complete delusional thing to say? No, I don't, because Devin Haney is a person that, with his length and with his size, because he does appear to a little bit, at least to me, to be more of a natural 140-pounder than what he does a natural 135-pounder. And when it comes to Vasyl Lomachenko and Gervonta Tank Davis, we've seen Vasyl Lomachenko have a little bit of issues with that of the taller, lengthier, stronger fighters already, with that maybe even Luke Campbell or Teofimo Lopez. And it even seems like Gervonta Tank Davis is starting to have issues as well. Not only even with just overall, what the hell are those fighters' names? Rolando Romero and, Mario Barrios, but also as well as Isaac Pitbull Cruz. Could it be that Devin Haney could potentially beat both of these fighters? And what would that mean for his future potential ranking on my pound for pound list or on the top 10 pound for pound list? And overall, what is Devin Haney's career, in my view, heading into? How great will he potentially be? What will those Vasyl Lomachenko and Gervonta Tank Davis wins mean to his career, which I do think they are very big wins. But anyways, we're going to talk about that in this video. Let's get into it.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So after Devin Haney became the undisputed champion of the lightweight division at age 23, ESPN, who covered the fight, they put up their new updated pound-for-pound list and had Lomachenko ranked above Devin Haney. Remember, Devin Haney, who just beat George Kambosos, George, who beat Teofimo, and Teo, who beat Lomachenko. So even though Lomachenko, he pretty much lost in this tournament, while Devin Haney ended up winning the Super Bowl, because of ESPN's bias agenda, they're giving Devin Haney more of a reason to want the Lomachenko fight.
Well, let me stop Dante's Boxing Nation right there. And this is a part of the reason why I like to review Dante's Boxing Nation's videos. Because Dante, or some of these channels, if you fall into the trap, they'll put a little slight truth into some of their statements, but oftentimes it is also spread by false propaganda or complete bias or racial motivation or emotion. Because at the end of the day, these guys, they are fanboys. It just is what it is. But listen, I certainly understand Dante's Boxing Nation's point of Vasyl Lomachenko being over Devin Haney. I do not believe that he should be over Devin Haney on the current list either. And listen, what I will say is this: if you were to say to me that you believe that Vasyl Lomachenko, that he's more skilled than Devin Haney, or at least looks to be more skilled, and on top of that, he has the better resume. Well, I do believe that Vasyl Lomachenko does have the better resume than that of a Devin Haney. And many people may say, oh, well, how can you say that? Well, take a look at Vasyl Lomachenko's resume. Lomachenko does not even have 20 fights on his resume, and he has wins over Guillermo Rigondeaux. When he beat him, he was a top 10 pound-for-pound fighter. He also ended up beating Jorge Linares, who was pretty much at the best point in his career. He had not lost in several years. And then, of course, he also defeated the undefeated Nicholas Walters, who wasn't a great fighter at the time. And he also defeated the undefeated Gary Russell Jr., who, of course, eventually later on became a dominant, somewhat A-grade champion. So Lomachenko, I do believe, has a better resume than Devin Haney. So in some people's opinions, do I understand maybe why Lomachenko would be ranked above that of a Devin Haney? I understand. But at the current moment in time, Vasyl Lomachenko has no belts. And on top of that, he did lose the last big fight in his career against an A-grade fighter. And I thought that Teofimo Lopez did win. So at the end of the day, Lomachenko personally would not be above Devin Haney on my list, but I understand certain people's opinions. But Lomachenko would not be on my top 10 pound for pound list at the moment. At the moment. Now, if Lomachenko was able to get a victory either over Gervonta Tank Davis or over that of Devin Haney, yes, once again, he would have to graze, or he would have to, overall be on my top 10 pound for pound list, but not until that happens. I think Lomachenko right now is probably within my top 15, but I can't have him any higher than that until he once again gains a belt. So we'll see what happens.
Are putting a bigger target on Lomachenko's back by saying that he's pound for pound one of the best fighters in the world. That's just going to make Devin want to fight Loma more.
Well, Lomachenko, in my opinion, is one of the best pound for pound fighters in all of boxing. I just don't think that he's number 10 right now, or I don't think that he's within the top 10. I believe that Vasyl Lomachenko, Artur Beterbiev, Stevan Fulton, maybe a couple of other fighters, I think that they're all decent, pound for pound fighters, but I have none of those fighters right now within my top 10. Maybe even Jermell Charlo, and I know a lot of people that disagree with Jermell Charlo, but it really is a debate in my view if Jermell is top 10, because there's just so much talent right now overall within the top 10 pound for pound, and with so many new entries this year, can you 100% argue without a doubt that he deserves to be over Devin Haney or Shakur Stevenson or Dimitri Bivol? I'm not so quite sure about that. And that's also, if you put Jermell Charlo on the list, that would mean that someone else has to go as well. And you have other fighters out there that could potentially be there, like a Naiwa Inoue within my bottom 5 or a Josh Taylor. And the top 5, once again, I pretty much have them locked. So it is what it is, which once again, I have Crawford, Spence, Fury, Usyk, and Canelo Alvarez within my top 5. So it just is what it is. But overall, this is going to be very interesting. And I think that a Devin Haney versus Vasyl Lomachenko fight, I think that it's a great fight. I not only think that it's a great fight for Devin Haney, it's also a great fight for Vasyl Lomachenko. And this will be pretty much put up or shut up time for that of Vasyl Lomachenko. If you want to be remembered on the all-time great level. Now, I do believe that Vasyl Lomachenko is going to be a Hall of Famer, but it doesn't really take much to be a Hall of Famer in the sport of boxing. There's certain fighters that, in my opinion, really did not do much in their career, and they made the Hall of Fame in boxing. So at the end of the day, Lomachenko is going to be, in my view, a first ballot Hall of Famer. But I think that right now, with what Lomachenko has accomplished, he's just a great fighter. But the big question is he an all-time great fighter? We'll see overall with that. And Devin Haney would have to prove a lot in this fight as well. Because Vasyl Lomachenko would hands down, in my view, be the biggest talent and the most skilled fighter that Devin Haney has ever fought in his career. And certain people may say, well, what about George Kambosos? He defeated Teofimo Lopez, and Teo ended up defeating Lomachenko. That's understandable, but if you're a person that really knows boxing for what it is, you know that styles make fights. And George Kambosos, I'm sorry, but I think that he pretty much is another Andrew Ruiz or Buster Douglas. That's really all he was. But anyway.
That's going to make fighters like Shakur Stevenson want to fight Loma that much more. But it's not only Devin that wants this fight. ESPN, they really want this fight because they truly still believe that Lomachenko is this matrix that should be compared to Floyd Mayweather or Sugar Ray Robinson. But there's one person in particular that came out that works for ESPN, and
I noticed that Dante's Boxing Nation that he's highly annoyed that someone like a Vasyl Lomachenko, that he is compared to all-time great black fighters. And I get it to a degree. Would I put Vasyl Lomachenko on the same level as a Floyd Mayweather Jr.? No, I would not. But at the end of the day, Vasyl Lomachenko is an all-time great talent. He is an excellent fighter. There's no debate about it. But I just find it interesting because you notice he never had a problem with saying that Deontay Wilder deserves his flowers, or someone like a Gary Russell Jr. He'll completely treat these fighters with respect, black fighters, black American fighters especially, who may even have multiple losses on their record. But he never treats Lomachenko or a Caucasoid or a Latino or Asian fighter with respect if they get multiple losses. So it just is what it is. So once again, Dante, even though I understand his point, you can tell at the end of the day that he can't be trusted because at the end of the mind, his mind is plagued. All right? At the end of the day, his mind is plagued. So it is what it is. He has a racial bias. He has a very big emotional and racial issue. So you cannot trust someone like that. It just is what it is.
Said that Devin Haney, he beats Lomachenko. He also beats Tank Davis.
I'm not gonna lie to you, but I can tell you this. Haney, on the other hand, I'm gonna let you guys know right now. I think at the 135-pound limit, I think Haney might be the last one standing. And everybody's saying, what? Who? Huh? I know y'all what y'all saying right now. Yeah. Yeah, Tank, yeah. I'm saying, Garcia, yeah, you can get that word too. You know what I'm saying? Lomachenko.
Well, when it comes to Ryan Garcia, I really need to see him in the ring with someone that, in my view, is really going to challenge him. And listen, Ryan Garcia seems like a great physical talent, and he does have some skills, but until he really gets in the ring with someone that I believe is truly going to challenge him, it's going to be very hard for me to really give him a certain barometer. But it is what it is. Anyway.
Yeah, you can get that word too. And everybody like, oh, wait, he don't punch hard. He don't this. Everybody keep making excuses.
What I will say is this. I believe that Ryan Garcia, Vasyl Lomachenko, and Gervonta Tank Davis, all those fighters, I believe that they have a decent more chance against Devin Haney than what George Kambosos does. Because I just believe that they're naturally more talented. But anyway.
For Haney. But what y'all fail to realize is that boy is sweet tactically. That boy is long. He's strong. He got physical strength. He got good defense to go along with his offense. He's active up front with his jab. He's active with his combinations and countering. Like, there's a lot to Haney. And now you imagine a Devin Haney and Tank fight. You saw what Rolly was doing. And you say, well, Tank, Haney don't have the same punching power as Rolly, so how's he gonna keep him off? He gonna keep him off with controlling that distance outside.
Well, Devin Haney, when it comes down to it, Devin Haney does not have a great power. He just never has. That's not something that he was gifted with. Sometimes when it comes to power, especially in the sport of boxing or in athletics, you either have it or you don't. All right, when it comes to certain fighters like a Manny Pacquiao, for example, his power was so extraordinary for his size, pretty much because of his body dimensions, and not only that, but he just had a natural great pop when it came down to it. Not everyone is going to be like a Manny Pacquiao. Not everyone is going to be like a Miguel Cotto or even a Floyd Mayweather Jr. earlier on during his days. Or whoever the hell else you want to compare it to, Sugar Ray Leonard, or whoever the hell else you want to put out there. Not everyone is going to be that level of a puncher, but Devin Haney has at least enough power overall to keep you off of him. So overall, what's going to be very interesting about Gervonta Tank Davis and Vasyl Lomachenko, if they end up fighting Devin Haney or Ryan Garcia, if you want to put him in the mix as well, is will they pressure him enough overall to make him uncomfortable and make him somewhat acquiesce to their game plan and to their power? Because I believe that Ryan Garcia, Vasyl Lomachenko, and Gervonta Tank Davis, they're all, probably debatable greater athletes than what a Devin Haney is in terms of the punching power. But all in all, punching power does not always mean that you're going to win the fight. Especially Gervonta Tank Davis and Vasyl Lomachenko, they might be a little bit too uncomfortable with the size and length of that of a Devin Haney. But we'll see what happens.
Long ass arms he got. That's what he gonna do, and he gonna move circles. Now I say Tank got a puncher's chance, no doubt about it, a puncher's chance in beating a Haney. But I'm not gonna lie, if they fall, I will favor Haney. He's a slickster, man. I'm telling you right now. And the better the
what I'll say is this, and what Timothy Bradley just stated is that he would favor Devin Haney over Gervonta Tank Davis. The way that I've seen Gervonta Tank Davis as of lately, I may favor Devin Haney as well. Because to be quite honest with you, Gervonta Tank Davis, he has not looked good within his past couple fights. Now, apparently you had a broken hand in mid-fight against Isaac Pitbull Cruz. So, I'll give you a little bit of a break for that. But in this last fight against Rolly Romero, understandably, you ended up getting the knockout. But to be quite honest with you, I thought that it was a very poor performance by Gervonta Tank Davis. I thought that he looked lost half of the time. I thought that he was just looking for one punch. Now, maybe one could argue that maybe it was just because he really did not take Rolly all that seriously. But I don't know. I'm going to have to see Gervonta Tank Davis, in my view, be in a bigger fight. And I'm going to have to see a better performance. Because in my view, that is not the best version of Gervonta Tank Davis that I've seen. And he better be careful. Because if that Gervonta Tank Davis shows up against Devin Haney could very much embarrass him. But we're going to see what happens.
competition, the better Haney you see, as you saw against Kambosos.
So does that mean you would also take Haney over Lomachenko?
Yes, I will also take Haney over Lomachenko.
You're not even hesitating.
I'm not
man.
hesitating, bro. I will take Haney over Lomachenko. Come on, dog. I'm going with Haney, the young gun. Active up front with that jab, boxing ability, sweet right hand, get in and out, make Loma miss, make that small guy swing at air. That's what.
And once again, I've also stated this about Devin Haney as well. And this is what I like about Devin Haney, which is something that all-time great boxers know how to do. When they need to turn up the offense, or when they need to throw more or have more in their arsenal, they know when they need to turn it up. And that's a big part of the reason why Jojo Diaz and George Kambosos ended up losing to Devin Haney, because those guys are not all-time great fighters. Now, whether Devin Haney will eventually become an all-time great fighter, that will be seen a little bit later on. Right now, I don't think I can call him an all-time great, but he's clearly a great fighter. So we'll see what happens.
It's all about, just like he did against Kambosos. Made Kambosos swinging that air. Phew, phew. He was air conditioning the whole crowd. I felt it down there. I said, ooh-wee. Ooh-wee, it's chilly down here, you know. It was beautiful boxing, man, and I'm sorry. I'm being honest with you. And so, you know, it is what it is, you know.
Now, let me just start by saying this. Tim Bradley, he broke that down really well. He really made a lot of great points. When it comes to Devin Haney versus Lomachenko, right after Devin Haney completely dominated George Kambosos, I watched that fight a couple of times. And then after that, I started to watch some Lomachenko fights to get a better idea of how a potential fight like that would play out. So I went back and I watched Lomachenko versus Teofimo Lopez. The first thing you notice in that fight is Teofimo Lopez completely nullified Lomachenko's offense just by controlling range, by throwing.
I agree, and that's what great fighters will do, at least with a great game plan. Unfortunately for Teo, his career has gone a little bit, I'm not going to say down the drain, but it's gone downhill a little bit ever since that Vasyl Lomachenko win. But, you know, he controlled range very, very well. Not only did he use his jab, but the good thing that he did, which is one of Lomachenko's weaknesses, one thing that Lomachenko does have to work on, is that he went straight to his body. Lomachenko does not have an A-grade defense towards the body, and overall, he was able to back him up because of his power. And Lomachenko, being naturally the lighter and being naturally, you know, the smaller guy, I feel that he was afraid, or I think that he was afraid to go in there half of the time, because he was afraid of possibly running into a punch that may knock him out. But if Vasyl Lomachenko is going to face that at Devin Haney or Gervonta Tank Davis next, he really overall has no choice. He's going to have to go in. And you're going to have to risk it to get the biscuit. It just is what it is. You're going to have to do what Tyson Fury did against Deontay Wilder. You're going to have to do overall, you know, what some of those fighters had to do in order to win those all-time great fights. Or what a Canelo Alvarez had to do with Gennady Triple G Golovkin. You know, get them uncomfortable. Because if you fight scared, like you did in the Teofimo Lopez fight, you're not going to win either of those fights.
That jab out there and controlling distance. In fact, before Lomachenko and ESPN start making all of these shoulder excuses for why Lomachenko lost, Loma actually admitted after the fight the reason why he didn't let his hands go is because he felt that he was never in range to throw a punch.
Well, listen, what I'll state is this. I agree. I think that the shoulder excuses is exactly that. I believe that they're excuses because Lomachenko looked to be throwing just fine later on down the stretch. But Dante, you should keep the same energy with all fighters. And we all know that when it comes to one of your fighters potentially losing, you're going to be right on top of that mountaintop, spreading any type of excuse that you want to. Because remember, this is the same guy that alleged that Deontay Wilder got cheated. He got poisoned. There was egg whites in the glove, blah, blah, blah. So Dante is really no better than any other person who makes excuses. So Dante is pretty much just a fanboy like everybody else. Or most other people, because not everyone is a fanboy. All right? Anyway.
Counter.
I mean, I know I'm not.
These were Lomachenko's own words. But we already knew that the whole shoulder excuse, the shoulder injury excuse was a lie because Lomachenko started to use his right shoulder in the second half of the fight. And if you can use your shoulder, how can you use that as an excuse for why you lost? When a fighter has a real injury, they no longer use that hand or shoulder anymore. Like Gervonta Tank Davis when he fought Isaac Cruz. Like Gary Russell when he lost to Mark Moxeo. That's how someone with a serious injury performs. They're fighting only with one hand. So as Devin Haney said he would do to George Kambosos, Teofimo pretty much handicapped everything that Lomachenko wanted to do in that fight. In fact, when Lomachenko realized he was behind on the scorecards, Loma decided to let his hands go. And when he did let his hands go, exactly what he was worried about actually happened. He was getting caught. Lomachenko, he started to get hit with a lot more clean shots than he.
Well, listen, that's going to happen when you're the shorter fighter, when you're the fighter all in all that has the arm length like a Lomachenko. Lomachenko does not have very long arms. He only has a 65.5-inch reach. Lomachenko is a smaller fighter. If Lomachenko is going to have a chance against Devin Haney or Gervonta Tank Davis, he has to get in there, and he has to overall keep up the tempo. You cannot win a fight overall against A-grade fighters by playing scared, like what you did in the Teofimo Lopez fight. That ain't going to cut it. So I don't want to hear any excuses from Lomachenko. If he is overall going to possibly win those fights, he is going to have to up the ante. Okay? If he wants to be remembered as an all-time great fighter, he is going to have to defeat some of these fighters. And if not, then he cannot be remembered as an all-time great fighter. He can only be remembered as a decently great fighter.
Was getting caught with,
like that of a Guillermo Rigondeaux,
when he was being extremely defensive in the first 6 rounds. And this is the reason why Lomachenko decided to surrender his belt when Devin Haney was his mandatory, as opposed to defending your belt as a champion is supposed to do. By way of contrast, at least compared to Teofimo Lopez, Devin Haney is levels above Teofimo. Devin has a much...
Well, I'm not going to say that Devin Haney is levels above Teofimo Lopez in terms of their peak. But what I will say is that, do I believe that Devin Haney is the smarter fighter than Teofimo? And do I believe that he is more defensively responsible and moves around more? Yes, I do. But there are also certain things that Devin Haney can't do that Teo could. He does not have that type of one-shot devastating power that Teofimo had. Could maybe Lomachenko get in there more against the Devin Haney? He could. But we'll see what happens.
Higher IQ than Teofimo Lopez. Speaking of that, that's another great point that Tim Bradley made when he was doing this interview. He brought up the point that you have a lot of these fans that try to say, oh, well, Devin Haney, he doesn't have any power, et cetera, et cetera. But Tim Bradley said this game is 90% mental. And he's absolutely right. I have told you guys on my channel numerous times that if you look at the history of the sport, 90% of the time, the fighter with the least power often beats the fighter who has all the power in the world. Brains beats brawn and brute.
Really? So then what you're basically saying is that Canelo Alvarez should have got credit all along when he defeated someone like a Caleb Plant or Billy Joe Saunders. People that you claimed were just C-grade fighters because apparently they didn't have A-grade power. So Dante's been full of shit this whole entire time. I've already told people this. He will change the narrative just like a regular fanboy does. Just like we see in ESPN or Fox Sports News. He'll change the narrative to whatever fits for him. Okay? He has no consistency. But anyway.
Force power almost every single time. Almost every opponent that Floyd Mayweather faced had more power than him, especially after he moved up 5 weight classes. He was fighting against guys that were 15 to 20 pounds bigger than him.
Well, the thing is that you have to have at least decent power overall to keep good and great opponents off of you. Because if you have no power whatsoever, more than likely you're not going to win any of those fights. Take a look at that one dude. Who the hell was that one black fighter? That's black American fighter. Lost to a Mexican fighter last time. Dude with the purple pink hair. Can't remember the hell his name was. Chris something. Corbin or some shit like that. Because of his lack of power overall, not only that, but of his lack of defense here and there, he ended up losing that last fight quite dominantly, and he was looked at as one of the top prospects. So you have to have at least decent power. But anyway.
When it comes to Pernell Whitaker, every single opponent Pernell Whitaker faced had more power than him.
And I don't think that Pernell Whitaker, all in all, really had bad power either. But anyway.
Ali versus Foreman, and the list just goes on and on and on. Not to mention Lomachenko.
Well, you can mention Ali versus Foreman, but a big part of the reason why was because Ali actually had very, very good power. Another good comparison is Mr. Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder. Dante was one of those guys because he's a part of the he's basically a part of the Pro Black Fighters League, the LDBC in the media. He was very much on Deontay Wilder's side, and he was one of the ones trying to allege that Tyson Fury had no power. Well, if he had no power, why was he able to make Deontay Wilder look the way that he did in the second and third fight? Even in the first fight, you could tell that Deontay was affected by his power. So you can't win against all-time great fighters usually without at least somewhat a decent power. But anyway.
Himself has never been known for his power. A lot of the stoppages that he gets is from accumulation. Now, another fight that I watched when it came to Lomachenko was...
Well, I actually don't necessarily agree with that. Vasyl Lomachenko, I actually think, has very underrated punching power. I actually think that he has A-grade punching power, especially for his size. It's just that he's facing fighters that are decently bigger than him. You know, these 135-pounders, some of them are even natural 140-pounders. So it's going to be a little bit harder for Lomachenko to stop some of these guys. Now, do I think that he has the same powers as Gervonta Tank Davis? No, but I would say that his is about 1 or 2 levels right below that. Lomachenko, in my view, has about A or A- power. Devin Haney does not have the punching power of a Vasyl Lomachenko, but that's not really the question. The question is that if Lomachenko will beat Devin Haney, if he can, he's going to have to pressure him. And he's going to have to make sure that his tempo is right there with Devin Haney, and that he somewhat makes Devin Haney uncomfortable, and that maybe he can somewhat pound him into submission. Because if Lomachenko believes overall that he's just going to move at these certain angles and with his defensive, and don't get me wrong, he's a very decent defensive fighter. But at the end of the day, Devin Haney is a person who knows how to up the ante and knows how to up the tempo when he needs to. So if Lomachenko thinks that he's just going to sit back and overall beat Devin Haney just overall by completely trying to out-counter him and have a chess match, that's not going to work. Devin Haney is the taller and lengthier fighter. Now, in certain regards, do I think that Lomachenko even has more skills than that of a Devin Haney, at least in certain areas? Yeah, you can maybe debate that. But Lomachenko is not going to beat a Devin Haney if he thinks that he's just going to play a chess match with him. You have to get in there. You have to pressure him.
Versus Linares. And it's crazy, man, because when you go back and watch that fight, you would be amazed. Well, if you didn't watch the fight a whole bunch of times, you would be amazed how easy Linares was able to hit Lomachenko with everything in the book. He was...
No, he wasn't really able to hit him that easily in that fight. But he was able to hit him with some stuff because Lomachenko, first of all, I don't think took him as seriously maybe as some other opponents. He even walked straight into a right hand at one point in time because Lomachenko and a lot of that fight, I think, was on coast mode. But also, at the end of the day, Linares is extremely speedy. He's a person that he will get his fill if you're not careful with him. He also got some decent punches in against Devin Haney when Devin Haney was not taking him seriously later on down the line. In fact, he very much badly hurt him.
Catching Lomachenko with straight rights over and over. He was catching him with check left hooks. He was catching him with uppercuts, with body shots.
And notice overall that Dante's Boxing Nation throughout this whole entire video, he hasn't mentioned Gervonta Tank Davis in terms of how Devin Haney could potentially beat him once. So Dante's Boxing Nation, he's just mainly focused on Devin Haney beating Vasyl Lomachenko. But anyway.
And this was throughout the fight. Remember, Linares is the one that knocked Lomachenko down with a lead right hand. So the conclusion is, if Teofimo can completely nullify Lomachenko's offense and Linares can hit Lomachenko at will...
He never hit Lomachenko at will. But that's a part of the reason why I like to review Dante's Boxing Nation's videos, because half of the time, not even just half of the time, 95% of the time, this man is just so goddamn delusional. But anyway, but of course, Dante's Boxing Nation, he should be smart enough to know, even though he's not that intelligent, he should be smart enough to know around boxing. He's been around there for I don't know how long watching boxing. You should know that styles make fights. So just because one fight ends up happening one way doesn't mean that this one's going to happen this way. But Lomachenko is going to have to pressure Devin Haney. He's going to have to make him very much uncomfortable. Because once again, if you think you're just going to move around and overall, not throw anything like you did in the Teofimo Lopez fight, you're sorely mistaken. That's not going to happen. All right, you're not going to win that fight like that.
It's going to be a hell of an uphill battle for Lomachenko to beat someone as gifted, as intelligent, with the reflexes and the athleticism and the long reach that a Devin Haney has. Devin Haney is definitely showing flashes of a Floyd Mayweather because of the simple fact that the better the competition is, the better Devin Haney performs.
That ends up being a lot of great boxers, what they overall end up doing. You've seen the same thing with Tyson Fury. You've seen the same thing with Floyd Mayweather Jr., maybe a couple of others. They end up rising to the occasion. And Devin Haney certainly did seem to be one of those. But Devin Haney, what I'm going to say about him is this. I'm going to wait a little bit until I especially see him at the 140-pound division. Right now, Devin Haney is within my bottom top 5 pound per pound. If he does end up beating Lomachenko and Gervonta Tank Davis, he certainly probably will have to be within my top 5 because both of those fighters right now, in my view, are top 20 pound per pound. But I'm also really going to see, is Devin Haney really the next Floyd Mayweather Jr., or is he the next Oscar De La Hoya? Is he someone that, once he finally meets fighters near his own same size and reach, will he start clearly looking a little bit more limited, kind of like what Oscar did in his career once he started moving up? And not everyone is going to agree with that, but you don't have to agree with me. Just take a look at the facts. Just take a look at the statistics. When Oscar started moving up, he had started having a lot more problems. But anyway.
Only the very, very special fighters can pull that off. Now, not only did Tim Bradley pick Devin Haney to beat Lomachenko, he also picked him to beat Tank Davis. But he hedged his bet with Tank having a puncher's chance. Tim Bradley pointed out the fact that Rolly Romero was able to control distance when he was fighting against Gervonta Tank Davis. You guys...
Yes, and overall, Dante, when it comes down to it, since you don't believe in the thing of styles make fights, since Rolly Romero looked that dominant, Gervonta Tank Davis is going to get killed against him, right? But I bet overall, within the next 5 minutes, we hear a different opinion from Dante. But I could be wrong. Let's see what happens.
Recall, I told you on one of my videos that Ryan Garcia might actually be serious about now taking the Gervonta Tank Davis fight because of what he's seen against Romero, Gervonta versus Romero. Because Ryan had always said, you're going to need a ladder to hit me, you too small to reach me, etc., etc. I told you guys it's very possible that the Romero fight may have given Ryan Garcia even more confidence to take the Gervonta Tank Davis fight because of the fact, once again, Romero was doing pretty well, controlling range and just throwing that jab out there. At least he was doing pretty.
Gervonta Tank Davis looked absolutely awful in that fight, in my view, at least compared to his usual standards. And that's not me trying to tear him down. That's actually giving him a compliment a little bit, because that tells me that that is not the standards that I am used to seeing from you. So Gervonta Tank Davis, I don't know what the hell. Excuse me. I don't know. Excuse me. My bad. I don't know what the hell's going on with him as of late. But Gervonta Tank Davis, he does overall need to step it up a little bit more. But we'll see what happens.
Good before he got knocked out by Tank. I completely agree with Tim Bradley that Gervonta, he definitely has the best eraser in the game right now. Gervonta could easily be behind in a fight and bail himself out of trouble with his power. But just in terms...
That's true, but I think with Devin Haney that it's a little bit of a different situation. Both Vasyl Lomachenko and Gervonta Tank Davis are going to have a consistent multitude of game plans, and they're going to have to be very confident, and they're both probably going to have to pressure Devin Haney because they don't really have the reach, they don't really have the size to really try to play a chess match in the middle of the ring without a Devin the main fault that I see with Devin Haney is that he does need to be a little bit better defensively. But I don't think that that's really going to get a little bit more exposed later on, or we'll see if he improves with it. Who knows? I don't think that that's really going to show up a little bit later on until he faces fighters that are really his own same size. So that's what I'm saying. He could be the next Oscar De La Hoya, or he could be better. We'll see what happens. Or at least in terms of facing fighters of his own same size. And once again, I know a lot of people will say, oh, how could you say that? That's not me saying that Devin Haney will become greater than Oscar De La Hoya definitively or anything like that. But we'll see what happens.
In terms of winning rounds, it would seem that Devin would definitely have an edge in that potential fight against Gervonta Tank Davis. Gervonta, he would have to work really hard to close the gap and get close enough to land punches against Devin Haney. Now, Tim Bradley, he wrapped this segment up by saying the only fighter that he believed could actually beat Devin Haney was Shakur Stevenson. You know, Tim Bradley's whole.
That would be a very interesting match as well. But to be quite honest with you, even though for his skill set, and I do believe that just taking a look at it, that Shakur is probably more skilled and talented than that of a Devin Haney. But I also believe that Lomachenko and Gervonta Tank Davis, that at their best, that they're probably all around more skilled than that of a Devin Haney. But it may not matter, because if you face a fighter that is decently lengthier and bigger than you, someone like a Devin Haney, who's probably a natural 140 pounder, then it's not always going to end up very, very well for you. Now, I don't know, maybe we'll see a little bit of a different result from, those fights. Maybe Devin Haney will appear even more dominant than what I know. But at the end of the day, what I see for them, it's going to be very hard for Devin Haney to lose really at the 135-pound division, in my view, really to any of those stretch of fighters. Because Shakur Stevenson, Vasyl Lomachenko, and Gervonta Tank Davis, they just really don't have the reach or the length really to, in my view, at least just 100% beat him. But if any of those fighters ended up beating Devin Haney, would I be 100% shell-shocked? No, I wouldn't. But what I will say is this. I would favor Devin Haney over any of those fighters right now, just at 135. Now, is that me saying that those fighters are not, debatably more skilled than Devin Haney in certain areas? No, that's not what I'm saying. But I would need to see them to see how they handle the size. Because Shakur Stevenson, he's never really fought a legitimate 135-pounder or 140-pounder, which is what Devin Haney is. And Vasyl Lomachenko, of course, he's shown a little bit of problems with that in the past. And Gervonta Tank Davis is starting to show some problems with that now as well. So it's going to be very interesting to see what those guys do.
Breakdown just shows you how many levels there are in the sport of boxing. And there's no doubt about it. Fighters like Devin Haney and Shakur Stevenson are on the highest level, regardless who you think wins that fight. So while
I believe that Shakur Stevenson, in my view, is actually decently more talented than that of Devin Haney, or at least by another level. Devin Haney, in terms of his skill set, he comes across to me as an A-level fighter. Shakur Stevenson comes across to me as an A-plus fighter. And when Lomachenko and Gervonta Tank Davis are at their best, they also appear to me to be A-plus fighters, but I'm going to need to see, at least at this point in time in their career, a little bit more of a put up or shut up sort of situation. So it's going to be very interesting to see what they're going to do.
ESPN's Tim Bradley feels that Shakur Stevenson has the edge over Devin Haney. He feels Devin Haney and Shakur Stevenson have the edge over all the other fighters at 135. Now, the last...
You can certainly debate that. I don't have a problem with that. The 135-pound division, with all those fighters there, you can debate that that is the most competitive division in the whole entire world of boxing right now.
I want to talk about in this video is how Tim Bradley ended that piece right there. You guys notice how he said, "I'm sorry, but it is what it is," etc., etc.
It was beautiful boxing, man, and I'm sorry. I'm being honest with you. And so, it is what it is,
Sorry for what? You don't have to apologize. The reason why I'm bringing this up, because if you watch my very last video about Terrence Crawford, this is exactly what I was talking about. In this interview, Tim Bradley, he didn't hold anything back. He spoke the whole truth, but he ends it with, "I'm sorry." Because even though Tim Bradley spoke the whole truth, he knows he just said something that 99% of the non-black fans did not want to hear, which
I somewhat agree with that. Or what I will say is that there is a certain amount of boxing fans that, of course, they claim that Devin Haney is boring, and they claim, no, that he did nothing but run. So Timothy Bradley, at least with him, you can say that he's somewhat hedging his bets, or that he's trying to protect himself a little bit. But I agree. There's no reason to apologize for that. Devin Haney did what he did. And in my video, I stated the same thing as well. There's no reason to call him boring. Devin Haney did overall what he had to do. So it is what it is. It's the same thing with Canelo Alvarez. When people overall, try to trash Canelo Alvarez, I will state the truth about Canelo Alvarez, which in my opinion is that he is an all-time great fighter. I'm a person all in all that I don't really apologize much for what I say, because usually what I am going to say is just going to be very honest, very blunt, very logical, and very objective. You don't have to agree with me, but at the end of the day, I usually more than likely have some sort of logical and objective debate on my side.
obviously includes old media. Tim Bradley has to say I'm sorry because he knows the racist fans don't want to hear the truth. Matter of fact, I can give you guys a perfect example of what I'm talking about. And coincidentally, this story, it involves Tim Bradley. Now, going into the Juan Manuel Marquez fight, I had already been making videos breaking down why Tim Bradley would beat Juan Manuel Marquez. Juan Marquez had been avoiding Tim Bradley for about a good 2 years. Bradley was
Really, that's interesting because according to your testimony, Canelo Alvarez is apparently not on the same level as a Juan Manuel Marquez or Oscar De La Hoya or any of these other all-time great Mexican fighters because apparently they didn't avoid anybody. Now all of a sudden, according to your testimony, now that Canelo Alvarez lost, all of a sudden we start to hear Oscar De La Hoya avoided Shane Mosley, according to Dante, and that Juan Manuel Marquez avoided Timothy Bradley. So what is it? Once again, you can't trust this dude as far as you can see him. But that's pretty much going to be about it for the video today. I don't want to stretch this out too long. And I've already heard this story before by Dante, so that's pretty much it. I just kind of wanted to talk about, in my view, what I think the future could be for the 135-pound division. But all in all, Mr. Devin Haney, he is a very, very special fighter. But I am going to wonder how overall he will do against Gervonta Tank Davis, Shakur Stevenson, Vasyl Lomachenko, and also against future 140-pounders. Because he could potentially be very successful 135 and maybe not look as good at 140. But who the hell knows? You never know. Boxing careers can just turn out so differently. But I wish the best for the kid. He is a very, very talented young gentleman. And overall, he does seem to have a very, very bright future. And there's some great fights for him ahead. But anyways, that's really about it for today. Thank you so much for watching. And I'll talk to you all later.